Okay, now that we are 6 feet apart, let's remove our masks. Hello.
Hello.
So I'm going to do a little introduction. I just wanted to make sure that we are presenting ourselves as COVID safe. We have been wearing our masks, so let's get to it. Yes. Our guest today is one that I met very early on in my career, and she has been nothing but kind and encouraging for so many years, especially to me personally, that we've known each other. Her passion for her work and the projects that she picks have made her the definition of fan favorite. So I like to call Shawna the fan favorite costume designer. Power Rangers, Firefly, Angel, Dollhouse, Dr. Horrible sing-along song, Powers, A Cabin in the Woods, Spongebob, and now Mandalorian. Please welcome Shawna Trpcic.
Thank you very much. Glad
No
to be
problem.
Here.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah.
I always start with a boring question just to get it out of the way, but I want to know, how did you come to costume design?
I'll do the short version. I was in high school. I wanted to be a truck driver, be a mechanic, but my art teacher said, no, you're going to art school. Helped me get into art college, and I went to Otis. While I was there, I studied fashion, but then I discovered I didn't really like the 9-to-5 aspect of it. So then I went to Film Institute and asked the student directors if I could design their student films, and I did that.
And then that's how you kind of just started to go. Now, the fun thing that I like, Shawna actually has a similar core to, at least for me, that's dear to my heart, which is why I feel like she understands us, which is she was an illustrator. So she started doing illustration, then assistant costume designer, and then became a designer. So can you talk us through how that process was, and like when you were illustrating and then moving forward?
Sure. Well, part of my training at Otis was you had to draw everything you designed. I also am a couturier, draper, sewer. I can do all those things. And so I had only designed these low budget films, but I couldn't afford to join the union as a designer, so I joined as an assistant designer / illustrator. And because of I love to draw, and I've always drawn comic books. I've always drawn caricatures and characters. And when Albert Wolski saw my portfolio, he was working on a movie called Toys, and he hired me as an assistant designer illustrator because he needed an illustrator. So that was my introduction, working for him on a movie that ended up getting nominated for an Academy Award.
That's a pretty good introduction.
Kind of good way to start. Plus, he's the most gracious designer in the world, and gave me credit for helping to design certain characters, and it was just above and beyond. And so from that, I continued to illustrate, and because I also had a background in sewing and designing, people often gave me more responsibilities. And so I ended up working eventually for Jill Hannessian as her assistant designer illustrator. And then she pretty much gave me Firefly when she moved on to 6 Feet Under. So.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
See, so I think that in hearing that, I want everybody to kind of be aware too, is that the connections that you make can also be very positive and very I don't want to say fruitful, but it's more so like there's a support network. So we have a supportive team of people, of creatives that are actively supporting each other and helping each other succeed. And so I think that that's a really great story. My story with Shawna is I ended up working with her on A Cabin in the Woods, which was awesome and turned out really great.
I hired you as an assistant designer / illustrator.
And that was my first time really kind of getting into the process of feeling like I was trusted in that way. So I have to say thank you to Shawna for that. We had a really good time doing all of those characters, and it was such a fun kind of it felt like very fast moving. I remember it being like there was a ton of characters, and it was like trying to figure out what's this, what's that, and Shawna was just there for the whole thing. I think also too, there was the period of time, I think, when you were doing Dollhouse, where I got to go and visit Shawna, and she kind of showed me around, but she kind of continued to show me the process. I think process is really important because it kind of shows you the different avenues of whatever department you're working in. And since Shawna has done almost every avenue of that, she's really knowledgeable, and I think that carries forth to how she works now, right? So I think let's talk about a little bit in terms of like, were there any inspirations that you had very early on in your career that helped to shape how you think about design?
Sure. I mean, the first designer I ever worked for was Bob Mackie. And so for me, the only reason why I was chosen for that project is at Otis, we would do fashion drawings. And I only drew, my models were always Black, African-American. And so that sort of set me apart, and he had an African-American character in his group, and so he chose me because I already had knowledge on how to draw the features and the skin color. So I would have to say that my influences or inspirations are always the exploration of the
art of creating a character.
Yeah.
That's what Bob Mackie told me.
And is there a moment like that you feel is there a character that you've worked on where you kind of, I guess, invigorated or felt like you were in the pocket of that, like in terms of you're like, this is a character that I really love, or I really kind of figured this one out?
I think we have to do that with every single character.
Yeah.
So as a costume designer, in case though some don't know, is you design every single character on screen. It's not like you're just there to design this person or that person. Although in bigger shows, there is sometimes a designer specifically for one character. But usually you're designing every single character, every single background, every single featured person. So for me, getting into the mind of every single character is important because you never know who they're going to feature. And someone like Boba Fett is a perfect example. He was a caricature almost on the Christmas holiday show. And then he was a character that you never saw his face, basically played by a stuntman or, on Empire Strikes Back. So he became a star. He became a fan favorite. So that has always helped. And he's always been my favorite, which is amazing that I finally got to design him. But it's important that every single character is given all the love and attention. And I do as many background fittings as I can because I love to talk to the individual actor, the dreamer who wants to be more than a background artist. But I think it's important for every character to be designed head to toe and every character to be thought out. Why are they wearing that brooch? What area of the country did they grow up in? Who was their mother and father? What were their careers? What would influence their dress? And so I find fascination in every character as I write their stories or I write their backstories in my mind. Even when I'm aging, I validate that stroke. What is that? Is that, sweat coming through these different layers of the Tusken Raider mask? Why is that there? So every character.
I think you guys would be surprised to know too that even though Shawna's busy and she is actively designing, she actively also gets in with her crew and she's getting her hands dirty.
Yes, very dirty. Yes.
With aging and things like that. I think that what you bring up is a really good point, which is in terms of at least costume design and character design, we often talk about the fact that you really do have to set up some kind of backstory or something. It's not just putting clothes on people. It's actively figuring out why people make choices.
Yes.
And then ultimately underneath all of that as well, there's the pipeline or the through line of making sure that whatever the character is wearing is helping to tell the story.
Yes.
Right. Is there what do you think is a common misconception that people have about costume design?
A lot of people come in thinking that they're sitting in a room drawing pretty pictures and they sew them and they put them on, doing one character, you know, and that's what they're in charge of. A costume designer is a politician. A costume designer is a CEO of $1 million company. A costume designer is a therapist, oftentimes even, keeping your crew up and building them up. And we can do this. Let's get over the 15th hour. We got this. A costume designer is also very much a storyteller as we communicate with the actors and get together with directors to create these characters.
Right. Now, there's something that I want to talk about because I think it's a little bit of a signature. So you add pink flamingos into your costumes.
Yes,
Can you talk to me about that?
Yes, this started on Firefly with a character named Badger. I put some sort of sparkly pink flamingos on his suit because he was trying to be a very important man. And to me, these were found objects that maybe he stole from somebody and they sparkled. And so he kept them on him. And I just love the juxtaposition of a dirty criminal and these cute
little pink flamingos. Right.
And my costumer, Cleo Manel, had brought those in our kit to Dollhouse, which was also a Fox show. And she's like, look, do you remember this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to put that. So I put it on Topher's assistant. As a kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod, and then that was it. I've hid them in Torchwood. I've hid them in This Is the End on the character right behind Rihanna. I mean, I've hidden them everywhere.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now that's something too that don't fans of the show when you go to Comic-Con and stuff like that, don't they always show up with their pink flamingos?
They show up with pink flamingos. Like I said, I have it on slippers, ties, T-shirts, pins, wherever. And they've even done a fan box that had a pink flamingo pin in it.
And there's also a hat, right?
I haven't seen a hat.
No, not the pink flamingo hat. There's a hat.
Oh, the Jane hat.
Yeah,
yes.
the Jane hat.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was based on. So that was from Firefly and Jane Cobb, which is funny because now I've designed Cobb Vanth for Mandalorian. But Jane Cobb
was supposed to get a gift from his mother, and he had to put it on in the scene. And I had sold Joss on the kind of idea that I used to get these slippers from my grandmother that she would hand crochet and had a big puffy, pom pom on top.
Mm-hmm.
But he had to put on the scene, and he had his army boots on, and that wasn't going to work. So I made a hat out of it. And because I needed a pattern, and I had his Thrilling Heroics hat, and a lady was knitting some scarves for Christmas, and I asked her to knit him this hat. So
it's just funny how things like that turn out, because it's so personal. Like,
Yeah.
it was such a personal thing, and now it became like not personal. Do you find that, specifically like just Firefly, because it's such a fan favorite, do you find that was something that you feel is constantly giving you like a little bit of a boost or reward, knowing that people responded so well to it?
Yeah, for sure. I get giddy every time I see one. And I think the reason why they responded is it did come from my heart.
Yeah.
It came from a story. It came from a story of love and gifts and family. And people really resonated with that. It really resonated with people.
And those are the things that I think that you actively aren't trying to do. It's just a part of something that then becomes something bigger, right?
When you care about what you do.
When you care about what you do, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the one other thing that I want to ask you specifically about is just in terms of like when you are starting, like when you're starting a project or you're starting an initial thing, where do you start? Like, are you starting with the script and then doing boards? Like, what's your process in terms of starting the initial thought of like what these people can be or what the characters can be?
Sure. Script comes first, and then meeting with before it's often I'll get the script, and then I'll just do deep dive of research, and I'll go deeper and deeper and deeper to really try to find out sort of what I think the backstory might be and what might be the reasons that these people wear these things or look this way. And then I'll do a presentation to the director, writer, showrunner, whoever I'm meeting with. And then I feed off of them, if their direction, they say, oh, a little less like this, a little more like that. And then I'll go into sketching often after that point to fine tune my design. And these days, especially with TV, you have time to do one sketch.
Correct.
So that first meeting, you really have to graft every little piece of information and really hook on every detail, because they're all meaningful, and it's so quick, and you have so little time. And then I just have to fine tune it into one sketch, and I'm like, okay, how's this? And I'm like, great, go get it done. And you got a day to build, an army. So.
I've also watched. I've personally watched Shawna sketch and draw, but then also be inspired by like one piece. Like she finds this like hat or this necklace or something,
sure.
and then that one piece can then turn into an entire costume, right?
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that, like in terms of like what you're thinking when that happens?
Yeah, well, I mean, even in the creation of a character like Ahsoka, I searched for every bead that I made her little chain out of. That I'm not saying it is or it isn't, is very reminiscent of the braid that she had when she was training.
Right.
So every single detail is important, and every single detail inspires me. Whether it be a pom pom on a slipper that inspired Jane's hat, or a bead that inspired, or the little braid on Ahsoka that inspired her little chain. I think every form of art is an inspiration for an artist.
So now that we're here, because we have to, I was trying to hold it, but we must talk about Mandalorian. Okay. It's honestly why we're here. It's why I'm wearing my shirt.
Yes,
like, we must talk about it. So let's start with Ahsoka Tano.
Sure.
Talk about, because that was such a fan favorite character, and I know that there was like fan casting with Rosario, and then Rosario ended up playing her, and she did an amazing job.
She did so good.
She's so awesome. I want you to talk about, like, walk us through that process of like starting the character from like start to finish.
Sure. Well, first, it's funny, when I first met Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, it was my job interview. And we interviewed in a room that had all the concept art from Doug Chiang's office. Yes. And I had already gone in wanting to I had already done research and designed a new Ahsoka Tano because of the way the last episode ended with Ahsoka and Sabine walking off into the sunset. I'm like, it would be really great to see her on The Mandalorian. And they're like, she's right there. And so that was kind of a neat thing that happened. So with them, so I kind of knew the general concept of what she should feel like, but both from the animation and from seeing Doug Chiang's work. And so then it was just lots of meetings with Dave Filoni and John and Doug, and bouncing off ideas and fine-tuning. Then it was just the search for the fabrics that would help me tell the story, because she is this sort of very spiritual being, and I needed in some of the very first concept drawings that Doug Chang's office, that Doug and them did, was the flowing of her robe and the almost iridescence of it. And I couldn't find that fabric anywhere. And I was finding fabrics that I could wash and make for her, for other parts of her costume, but I couldn't find that anywhere. And then Julie Robar, the costume supervisor for my department, she's like, why don't we just have you make the fabric? And I'm like, can I do that?
Yeah,
like, I was like,
Is that possible?
I would just love, can we afford that? And she's like, absolutely. This is a main character. You can do what you want. So I started collecting threads of all things. China silk threads that would give me the bright, bright, bright colors, and then these raw silks that would give me the gray and nubby. And we sent it to a weaver in New York on a farm in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And her name is Rabbit, and she's fabulous. And she would send me samples, and I would send them back saying, I need it heavier, I need it lighter, I need to be able to fray it, but I need the fray not to, and all these different instructions. And I got, 50 yards of this gorgeous, gorgeous silk that was part of her creation.
That's incredible. And then from that point, once you guys were able to kind of create the fabric and stuff, it feels like the character kind of took shape. So did you know at the time initially, so first when you were first designing, did you know that it was going to be Rosario? Were you designing around that, or were you just designing for the character first and then? Yeah,
it's the character first because Rosario inhabited the character.
Yes.
She is Ahsoka. Like she truly, truly is. So I was designing for the character.
Correct.
I think I knew that that's who they were looking at. It might have been a whisper, or maybe I was just following too many fan sites. But with her in mind, I'm sure we were designing. But I was designing for the character, and researching the character, where she came from, her sort of rebellion, but also the need of a live woman having to be able to fight and move, and the need of storytelling of her, the movement that I needed when the breeze is blowing and the wind is blowing, that's very characteristic of her character. And so it was many different things that influenced even Rosario herself. So Shannon Shorts, my tailor, he and I would meet with Rosario, and we had a little bit more of a corseted feel in the back, because we were trying to create this very samurai kimono feel, that very influenced by Seven Samurai.
Yes, right.
But it wasn't giving her enough movement in the back, and she's like, can we do it in the Razorback? And we're like, oh my gosh, that's how we solve it. We'll do the Euro jersey and a Razorback, and that way you'll have full movement. And so even meeting with the actress help us find her too.
And so then once you guys got that, like, let's talk about those influences, which is the Kurosawa kind of influences. Like, how did you kind of play those influences into designing specifically for that episode? Because it's so inspired by that.
Well, a lot of his work, what I just loved was the aging and the breakdown of the costume. But even as they were going across country, there was always a certain uniformity to what they were wearing. It meant something. People recognized it when they walked into a village, and it was respected, and it held their armor, and it held their weapons, but they always had it folded a certain way, and it was always draped a certain way. And I really love that, and that's very, very indicative of Star Wars. They basically wear one costume through the history of their life.
Right.
There are some basic changes, like when Luke Skywalker, was promoted and things like that.
Right.
And General Organa, but it's important to create an iconic character, and I really saw that in Seven Samurai and movies like that, and Good and Bad and the Ugly, where they basically wear one costume for the entire film, and it's aged to perfection, and it's soft, and it's lived in, and it's worn, and you see that warrior aspect of it. And I really tried to capture that with her.
I think you did a really good job with that too, because there's the points where it's like it's interesting how even though she has like kind of like this one costume and then kind of like her like cape or her cloak, it felt like we got different versions of her. And I think it's because she feels lived in, and she feels worn, and she feels like a real person. So I think you did a good job there. I'm going to go back to this still right here, which is we have Diana Lee Inosanto.
Yeah.
I want to say, I've said your name wrong. I'm sorry. But she's Bruce Lee's goddaughter.
Yes.
And you got to work with her. Talk about her costumes, and then kind of like how you had to adjust for her, her stance.
So Mary Ann Parker is my tailor for her.
Yeah.
And Dave Filoni kept on saying he wanted it to cross. He wanted it to cross. Like he couldn't quite define it. And so I literally did a sketch where I was just sort of almost scribbling black and red. And I had found these amazing silks that it was basically black, but it was a silk shantung, but really thin, and it had this red dashes in it. So I was able to find the red, the gold, the black, and then this the whole pant is out of that dashed, black and red outfit. When we put it on her, though, she's a real fighter. And so she has a stance about her. And so all this draping kind of crunched up, and we're like, oh, dear. So we had to sort of realize that she's going to be fighting. This is not a poised, beautiful. This is a strong. So we made some adjustments. And like I said, those are 100% the real pant, with all the pleats and the opening. And she got in them, and I'm like, that's too much fabric to fight on. But we based it on, a samurai pant. And she just went into the movements. I got chills just talking about it, in the fitting room. And she's like, these are perfect. Okay. And it was amazing to watch her inhabit the character in front of us.
And let's talk about the subtlety, even though like if people are missing that, the subtlety between using the red.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So you have the red and the black, which is reserved for,
well, generally the Sith.
Yes.
But hers isn't quite the bright red of the Sith, but it is a fine line, and Dave Filoni keeps me very accountable on that, to make sure that we're not alluding to something that we shouldn't, because the fans pick up on everything. So but she is sort of a bad guy, and so it was okay for me to go there.
Yeah, I'd say she ended up, what did she say? She said, kill the women and the children or something. I'm just like, Jesus. She's like, get rid of everybody. So like, I think, or go door to door. But that was awesome. And I did love that episode. I think that the juxtaposition, the kind of warrior aspects, and the I don't want to say it's like ceremony. It felt like there's like a code.
There's definitely a code.
Yeah. I felt like that really came across, and it was a strong episode. Yeah. Let's talk about moving into, I guess we can talk about Boba Fett.
Yeah.
maybe a little bit talk about Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So we just got this really awesome episode with him. And I want you to talk about just the pressures of even just trying to stay true to canon, and also then expanding into something new.
Yeah. That's actually not Boba Fett.
Yeah, that's not Boba. But yeah, like
and that's from season 1, that was designed by Joseph Porro. That particular.
Yes, we gotta get a Boba Fett in there. But in the meantime, talk to us about Boba Fett.
Yeah. So again, there was concept art from Doug Chang, and he was in the classic sort of light bluish gray jumpsuit with the classic armor. And I was working with illustrator Mike Awandi, and
shout out to Mike.
Yeah, shout out to Mike. I love the idea of the skirt, and because a lot of in samurai they always have the sort of a skirt, a fighting skirt, and things like that. And the idea of him having come through the desert and these royal robes and everything, I wanted to integrate him in black. And Filoni's like, no, he can't be in black with the armor, because that goes too dark. That goes to Darth Vader. But Mike Awandi drew it up anyways, and I was like, oh, I forgot to give you the note that he didn't want this, but I love it.
But I really love it, right?
And because I had only pitched it verbally,
right?
And so I brought the next presentation with Jon Favreau and Dave and Doug. And Dave loved it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is great. Yeah. And so I got to touch an iconic character with my dream, with my vision. And that was amazing.
How, in that instance too, how are you bridging, like, because you have to try and look at what he's been, and you're also showing us what he is. How were you able to like bridge those things together, like make it new, but still make it to where people are like recognizing who he is as a character?
Right. Well, I mean, he'd been through the Sarlacc pit, and and there's a whole backstory that I'm sure the fans will help rewrite or whatever. But it was important to me to show a journey. I don't know what that journey is, and I don't know how that journey will ever be seen. But it was important for me through the acid burns on the armor, and through his choice of. So all of his fabrics were silk that his unders were built out of, and they're all very aged and worn in, and it just to show a journey that will hopefully be written someday.
Are there things when you guys are looking at it too? I think one of the things that I just wanted to point out, especially this is from Mr. Rob McKinnon, another concept artist, because he's like really into Star Wars, and I asked him, was that he wanted to kind of call to attention to the fact that everyone that's working on this show is doing such an amazing job in the sense of really sticking to the things that are inherently Star Wars, but also expanding them and making them meaningful and cool and fun to watch, and then getting the details right. So he talked about like the knee rockets, like stuff like that, or the dents, and the dents in the armor, like very much so, like on par with like how you guys are sticking with looking at everything. Now, are they archiving everything, or do you walk into an archive room, or are you looking at like old costumes and then trying to like figure them out? Like, is there like a rule book for that?
Doug Chang, who's the most amazing, gracious man in the whole wide world, who is I guess the head concept artist for Lucas. He said, I'm gonna get you on a plane and fly you out to Skywalker Ranch, and we're gonna walk through the warehouse, and you can touch the original costumes and take pictures with color cards and take measurements to every inch of everything. We measured the dent in the helmet, and also worked with Legacy Effects on this particular costume to build it for me. And it's doing the math. It's getting it right. It means that much to us, just as much as it means to the fans, because we were fans first. Yeah. And so I got to walk through the warehouse and take pictures and touch the original Boba Fett, and walk by the original Tusken Raiders, who were just as interesting to me, and the Jawas, and and the stormtroopers, and that's a fun story too. I got to reinvent stormtroopers because of what they had to do in the Rocky fight scene.
Please tell us about it. Yeah.
Well, this was all my specialty costumers, all my 705. Shout out to my amazing specialty group, because it was written that they're running around rocks. Well, as any member of the 501st will tell you, you can't even go up a step in a normal stormtrooper costume. So we did experiments of thinning the plastic, thinning the mixture, thinning not plastic, but what they were making.
Yes, sure.
The armor, so that they would have a little bend and a little more movement in them, especially with all the stunts.
So it was giving them more movement, so they could do a lot more.
And so not only did we give them a ton of movement, like the stuntman was like, "Oh my gosh, I can raise my hands! Oh my gosh, I can raise my legs!" And because they had to run up these rocks, we even for the first time in Star Wars history made it so that you could remove the. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. Move the bomb off the back of their backside and put it in the tube. And I know the name of it. I'm too completely blanking.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Can't remember.
But it's the first time in Star Wars history that happened.
That's happened. So then, actually, what's ended up happening? That's actually a really good thing, because that was something that we were worried about. Firstly, it's like you said, the 501st. They were able to be in the first season, right?
Yes.
Have they been in the second season?
No, we haven't had that big of troop numbers.
That big troop numbers, okay. But then the fact that you guys were able to, you kind of changed canon a little bit in terms of giving stormtroopers more movement.
Yes.
Yeah, because I know even in the episode that we had where they were like going down the rocks and all of that stuff, there was so much more movement. I was like, wow, the stormtroopers are really like, and I was not only were they moving, I was just like, wow, I'm actually kind of worried, like, are they going to hit something? Like they're actually going to shoot something. Like, this is insane. Yeah, like
that's funny.
So I felt they felt like a little bit more menacing to me, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about also too, I want to get into the code of the Mandalorian, which is talking about the removing of the helmet versus not removing, because we got Bo-Katan. Who takes her helmet off and is a part of the Death Watch, right? So walk me through creating those characters.
Well, that I worked with Ironhead Studios, building her, because I wanted her. I think part of a woman's power is her femininity, and what I was seeing in the animation was she was extremely feminine in her shape and in her uniform. But when I was seeing it translated to cosplay, everything kind of went very flat and masculine.
Right.
And I wanted to go back to the animation. I wanted to go back to the original, where she was the shape of a woman. I think women and women's bodies are very powerful. And I think you can be very authoritative and be very feminine at the same time. I did that with Cara Dune, too. I brought her top down a little bit, and I brought her corset in a little bit to accentuate her femininity, because her power is relentless. And, and it was like part of her power is being a dame, is being, is being a rockin' cool lady. So I wanted to do that with Bo-Katan and Koska, too, is I wanted to find the female figure in the armor and not let that be taken away just because they're soldiers. And I think that they pulled it off. They look just amazing, and Katie and I mean, both of them were just amazing inhabiting these characters. And I'm just so proud of how that costume turned out. We really worked with Dave Filoni extremely closely on working out the angles of the helmets and the cut of the cheekbones and the paint jobs. And we're going back and forth with, doing digital drawings to make sure that we captured the animated character before we brought her to life. Yeah.
That's actually leading to one of the questions that I had too, which I'm glad you're talking about that, which was talking about translating animation to live action, because I know that a lot of those characters are coming from that, and then you're also trying to deal with canon stuff you've seen before.
Yeah.
So how are you inherently, like, when you just talked about translating the animation in terms of the shapes and the forms and all of that, are you... I guess more testament to what you just said, which is what I like about that is that you're looking at something, you're trying to stay true to it, but then you're also trying to accentuate it on a real form.
Yes. Can
you talk about that a little bit in terms of trying to make these animated characters more real, like in terms of the shape language and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's not just shape language. It's what fabrics will actually do in real life, and it's what different lines will do to a real person's body in real life. And Dave has been working very closely with me because he doesn't want me to be restrained by the animation, because he wants our real actors to inhabit these characters. And part of that is feeling comfortable in your costume. You shouldn't be thinking about your costume when you're performing. That should just be part of your performance. So he's been incredible, because it is a lot of pressure, because I am a fan and I've been going to Comic-Con for 10 years straight, and you want to honor the fandom, you want to honor the legacy. And so it's really important to me, every aspect of bringing these characters to life.
I will say, too, that one of the things that I notice, even when you're bringing them to life, too, is when you talk about the fabric, there's so much depth in it that it also kind of translates in a different way. So when you're talking about fabrics that, like, have a little bit of a weave of red in them, but then, like, when you're moving, you get little turns of red, and it's, like, changing colors, and it's just really cool. So I think that that's also something that's great that's showing through in the way that you're translating these designs. And then also the aging and everything else, which we've shout out to the crew.
Yes,
for that, because geez, there's so much of it.
There's so much.
I'm gonna do a little aside really quick just to tell you guys that if we've talked about on different shows age or dyers, but they are literally a godsend, and a good one can make or break your show, just because I think a lot of people don't realize, like, when you see these things even come out, like when they're done, right, they look brand new. So much work has to go into making them look aged, or making them look worn or battle worn, or just even simple things like the creases in shoes, or like, the way jackets are, like the tears in them, the rips, all of that stuff. And then knowing also, too, that Shawna in her busy schedule is also jumping into that as well, is a lot. So shout out to your crew for that, because there's a lot of aging on that show. I think for this particular season, or just in general, which character has been the most fun to dress? It's a hard one to choose, right?
I mean, because Boba Fett, my childhood favorite, but Ahsoka just brought out so much creativity, and we worked out every fold in her belt. Shannon Short is also really, like, well versed in leather, and so much thought went into his belt. And then I had her side panels embroidered, and we found silks, and at first John and Dave were like, that's too see-through, that's it's too feminine. I'm like, watch. And then we washed it and aged it, and then they loved it. And so I really, really enjoyed all the many details of hers, but the magistrate was wonderful, and and even the mayor of that town, Wing, who's actually legacy Disney architect and designer. So every character I love a lot.
Well, let's there's one thing that I want to draw attention to, so we can just squash it, which is this sweater.
Yes.
The sweater.
The Mon Calamari.
The Mon Calamari sweater.
Yes.
So tell us about that sweater.
So for the calamari, I did, because it's on a dock, I did a bunch of research of old Irish seamen, and I really wanted to get that right, and to really capture these salty personalities, and working on a dock. And it was all vintage. It was all from everything from the 1800s to the 1930s. And there's this sweater from these islands, and of course I'm blanking on the name. I should have written these things down, because under pressure I forget all the names. But it was amazing that the cable knits of these sweaters tell the stories of those that are lost at sea, or of a family, and their markings, and the twist of the cable are easily recognizable by other fishermen, and so they kind of know your story by the details of your costume, which is the embodiment of what a costume designer does, is creating a character, telling a story in one shot. And so what was amazing is that now there's like a Facebook group called the Cozy Fish People, and their word, instead of "this is the way," is "stay cozy, my friend," or something like that. And just to see, you never know what the fans are going to lock onto. But again, that was done with love. That was done with research. That was done with, I wanted them to look like they're in a cold, wet environment. And although, the Mon Calamari are fish, basically, it's maybe it's keeping the moisture in. Because, and so I just love that the fans notice that. And, although some might think it ridiculous, I wanted it to feel authentic.
No, I think if anything, I think this is great. I love being able to dive into it because then people know what the reasoning is behind things. So it's not just some random sweater from JCPenney people.
No, it's from the Irish Isles.
It's from the Irish Isles, and it has a very real meaning as to why they are wearing that. Yes. So thank you for clearing that up as well. I also wanted to talk really quickly about the Marshal.
Yes.
Timothy. Oh, yeah. I can. Timothy, I'm horrible at your name. I'm sorry. But I'm glad that was one of that reference to me felt very Western.
Yeah.
So can you explain kind of the balances between like what you were looking at to do that character, and then also the fact that he had to then give up his armor.
Yeah.
But he'd been using it for this purpose. So
I'm sure the fans have already noticed, but I based his shirt on not Mal. Oh, from Firefly. No, I based his shirt on Han Solo.
Okay.
It's Han Solo's cut because Han Solo always had a very Western martial feel to me. He had that cowboy feel, but in the Star Wars way. So the cut is very Han Solo. But I wanted it out of a fabric that sort of caught the wind and would blow and didn't seem classic cowboy. And so now I'm blanking on the name, but it has the little holes in it rather than a solid, hardy fabric. It's a little more blouson, and I wanted to mix that with his extreme power, and because he's a marshal with a heart.
Right.
He loves his villagers. He loves his town. And the only reason why he inhabited that, the armor was to protect his town. Right. And from the giant sand creature, crate dragon. So I wanted to show both his strength and the softness for his community.
And I'm also gonna give Shawna a little help too and tell you guys that you guys have to remember, especially when you're working, Shawna did this a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's like although the research is there, sometimes it's hard to recall. Sometimes I can't even remember what I did like 6 minutes ago or why I walked into the kitchen. So trying to remember the fine details of this thing is very difficult.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. But no, just the general, I think knowing the inspiration behind these things is really helpful.
Yeah.
And also it just kind of furthers that thought process that not like that everything is kind of has its purpose.
Yes.
So that's a good thing for that. I think there might be one other question I think that I wanted to ask about this one, which was, what do you feel like is maybe the most rewarding thing that you've done on the show so far?
Working with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and
Love
Doug
that.
Chiang.
Yeah.
I have to see and all the visiting directors like Bryce Dallas Howard and Robert Rodriguez. And I mean, every single one of them has been a dream to work with. These are incredible, incredible artists. And with Jon Favreau's leadership, there's a community that he creates, a creative community where he's really encouraging you to be your best. I have never worked so hard in my life than I did on that show. And it was because it's your passion. You see how much he loves it. You see how much Dave loves it, how much Doug loves it, and you love it, and you're being encouraged to express your love, and you're not being made fun of for being so into it. You're being encouraged because you're so into it. And I'm like, this is the shirt, and this is the detail, and only the Uber fans will find that, and I'll hide little things in Ahsoka's costume, and little fans will find it. And what's even amazing with Ahsoka, the little details is that when Dave Filoni's wife came in, she's like, "Can I see the costume?" Like, they're even fans.
They're very excited.
He had told her so much about the costume that she couldn't wait to come in and touch it and hold it and see all the different fabrics that we would use and all the different treatments to the fabrics. And then she was looking at the bead, and she just became stunned, and she's like, "Oh my gosh!" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "The symbol on this last bead." And I said, "Yes." And she's like, "I had a dream on the top when I was in deep prayer, and on top of a mountaintop, and in I don't remember where she said she was, Tibet or something like that." And she's like, "I saw this vision, and I got the tattoo. It was the exact circle X and 4 dots as the end bead of Ahsoka's bead." So I had chosen sort of spiritually the same image that she had seen years ago and tattooed on herself.
That's incredible.
So working with people like that who are truly invested in it, heart, body, soul, and mind and spirit, it's a true gift.
It feels like it too, and it feels like everybody it's one of those crews that feels like they're collectively all actually working together and all saying we're all moving in the same direction.
For sure.
And drawing attention to that further, something that I've kind of noticed and I wanted you to expand on is the diversity of the show that we're seeing in terms of the characters on screen. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, Jon Favreau is committed to, he always has been committed to seeing diversity on screen. It just makes the world better, because everybody brings their own culture and their old imprint. It's what heaven will look like. It's what Earth looks like. It's what every screen and piece of art should be influenced by. And he's always very conscious, both, diversity-wise in age, weight, race, male, female, trans, whatever. He's always very uber aware of bringing all the community to the table to bring this collective piece of artwork to the screen. And I think that kind of love and determination influences us. It was funny when Julie Robar and I were crewing up. It's very easy, just to go to the quick circle that you're kind of familiar with, but part of I forget the word, but just the history of racism, where not as many people of color were able to start in the business.
Correct.
At the same time, because it was very white for a long time. And so finding people that you can bring in to start as a PA position and then raise them up and train them, it might take a little bit more work, but you find those people. You find those people who are learning, who are in school, and you bring them in as PAs, and then they get exposed to all the different departments, and then you raise them up and train them so that they too can bring in their people and raise them up and train them. So it's not just diversity on the screen. We're all very, very committed to making sure that we're reaching out to all ages, sexes, religion, whatever, and races, to bring a complete artistic vision to the screen.
And that's something that I really love. It's something that has been a passion of mine as well, even in terms of just I feel what I love about this is I feel that visuals are super important. It's like it's my world specifically, just being a concept artist, is visuals are so important. We're bombarded by them every day. We're surrounded by them, and then also we're surrounded by so many different types of people. It's really nice to have our entertainment also show that, and also knowing now too, I'm glad to hear that it's also behind the scenes, because you have to have different diverse points of view, but it also, I think I touched on this a little bit when I spoke with Dana Pink about Lovecraft Country, which is, in this instance, the best thing about diversifying worlds like this is that we all finally get a chance to play. We all feel like we're a part of it. You can see yourself in different characters, or a character does something that you relate to from when you were younger, and then being able to play with that like in an intergalactic world is just so much fun. So thank you to your crew. Shout out to Jon Favreau. Much love to you for doing that. I think that's great. I think, is there, now that we're kind of moving, let's move into a little bit more a different topic. I want to talk to you about working during COVID.
Sure.
So talk to me a little bit about how you've adjusted to that, and like how you guys are being safe, and all just the differences in, working before versus now.
Well, season 2 wasn't happening during COVID. So I am not working on season 3 hasn't started yet. So working during COVID is hard to talk on.
Yes, for sure. No, for sure. That's completely fine. I know that I know that a lot of the things have just in terms of just even just living during COVID.
Yes, yes.
Like,
yes.
Yet alone working.
But I mean, I've done a little low budget project that I can speak to.
Sure, please.
That we were putting together, and it was very important. You know, everybody's getting their temperature taken. You're getting your COVID test. You're, you know, all these different things. So I think the thing that we have to keep remembering is that you might not be afraid of catching COVID, but you should be afraid of bringing it home to someone you love.
Correct.
And I think that keeping the industry going is important because of our entertainment, and it's how we can escape a little, and it's how we get encouragement, and it's how we learn new things, like the Queen's Gambit was, you know, now me and my son are playing chess. I mean, that's just
was so incredible.
It was such a great movie, you know, and her costumes were just extraordinary. So so I think entertainment is a sort of essential business, nothing like the heroes of the frontline workers. But I mean, on a side note, it's because we do need that escape, and it's the family time. It's how we can, you know, talk about something else besides, you know, what we're scared of and our pressures. And so I think it's important to keep it going, and I respect the film industry's commitment and the union's commitment to keeping us safe and getting us COVID tests 3 times a week, and taking our temperatures, and keeping us 6 feet apart, and giving us face shields, and giving us masks. You know, I even got a chain for my mask so that I have it with me no matter where I go, because I don't want to bring it home to someone I love. And, you know, and although my pod is very small at home, you know, I do see my mother, and I would never want to. I've never want to jeopardize anybody.
The same. I've been keeping my pod very small and just kind of trying to make sure that we're at home. I went through a period, I don't know if this is the same for you, just creatively, where at first I was a little like, I'm used to working at home now, because I've been, a lot of stuff can be done through Zoom, and then I'm illustrating, so I'm sending stuff back and forth. There came a point where at first I was kind of a little burned out. But then I had this full invigoration of creativity where I started to because I enjoyed being at home, and I was seeing my family more, and then I had time to actively kind of think out things that I, you know, like to do. And then because of where I live, it's like very, you know, it's just very, I don't want to say isolated, it's very slow. It's very suburban and very, you know.
We live in the same area.
Same area. I didn't want to put you out there, but yes, we live very similar areas. So it's like, because of where we are, it just feels very calm. And I think I was able to find a piece of calm, but then creatively I was able to be more inspired during COVID because I had time to slow down. So I think that was something that I thought was interesting too, along with it kind of feeling, I tried to explain it to my daughter. My daughter's 10. And I tried to explain to her that the COVID time feels similar to me in some instances is the way it was before we had the big technology boom. For sure. Where it just felt like things were slower, like, oh, someone calls, you may call them back like next week, like, you know, or the day, but like, it's not like everything wasn't immediate. And I like that.
I mean, I started a couple of paintings, a watercolor and acrylic painting, and I, you know, and like I said, I bought a chess set, you know, the slow game of chess, you know.
It's been so incredible watching the Queen's Gambit. I think what took me most by surprise by that is like, everyone's like, Queen's Gambit, and everyone's watching it and saying it's so awesome. And I was like, I just kept saying it's about chess, and I was like, I'm not really into chess. And then by the end of the first episode, I was like, we're on board, like, let's go. We're in for this whole thing. So I was like, so that was fun to kind of do during quarantine. And that was something, again, like you said, now picking it up and just picking up things. Is there anything that creatively you've picked up during quarantine just from being at home?
Well, you know, we bought a house shortly before it hit, so we were kind of moving in at first. But then, you know, once I got the easel set up, I started painting and drawing. And my daughter has redesigned her bedroom 400 times and has dyed her hair every color of the book, and has, you know, now shaved her head. You know, so she was expressing her creativity that way. But it is family times that we've been baking bread and baking cookies and you know, so it really is going back to the old-fashioned days of really spending quality family time together, which is such a gift.
What advice would you give our listeners, or anyone that's new, that's starting out, that wants to do costume designer, wants to do it as a career?
Well, you know, we do have people that we do bring into our department who are starting out. It's very hard work. You know, getting a production assistant in the costume department, you are basically doing everything from getting lunches to taking out the trash, to doing returns. It's all very clerical and very boring work, but you're being exposed to everything.
Right.
And then you at least see and learn how that business works. So that's starting really, at the bottom, which I think is a really good way to get going. I took a different route, which I really love too, is going to film schools and asking the student directors and producers if you can design their film.
Yeah.
Because then you do everything. I've held boom, which is the sound mic.
Yeah.
You learn every aspect of filmmaking from, like, actors would say, the costume designer usually has an iron with her. I'm like, oh, okay, because I was really learning. I was my own department. And then you slowly grow and learn more. So you will always have compassion on your set people doing the long hours. You'll always have compassion on your people aging and dying and the rawness of their hands from sanding all day, because you've done every single layer of it. So that's the best way, I would say, to get started is to start on the student level and move up. So I think, again, a recurring theme, you guys know, for me specifically, is passion, which is the passion and the drive to be able to do this thing and to find where you kind of fit in, being able to fully humble yourself and know that you are going to try different parts of the department. You may be doing something that you're not completely interested in, but you're learning. The ability to learn and then having the passion to see it through and exploring different career paths ultimately leads you, with everyone that we've talked to, it leads them back to what they really truly love to do. In this instance, I also want to give a shout out to Shawna personally and say that as I've watched her, she's worked so hard. Completely hard. One of the nicest people that I know, and I am so proud and so happy for her to have Mandalorian as a show that she is actively working on. And so I needed to give you that shout out, because I think creatively this business can be difficult, and the constant byline in it, especially with it, is the passion, loving what you're doing, and working hard. And Shawna is all of those things. Thank you so much for joining us today. I need to give a shout out to our one of our sponsors, which is Gardena Cinema. Gardena Cinema is the only old-fashioned single-screen standalone neighborhood movie theater still in operation in South Los Angeles area, owned and operated by Judy Kim and the Kim family since 1976. Yay. So make sure you guys check out Garden Cinema. Gardena, sorry. See, now, sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Kim. Gardena Cinema. And also want to give a shout out to Marilyn Vance for starting our podcast. And tell us where we can follow you. At TRPCIC on Instagram and Shawna Tprcic on Facebook.
Make sure you guys follow Shawna and keep up with what she's doing, and maybe at some point she can drop us some more nuggets or some hints at what she's up to. And follow me on Instagram at Phil PHIL _Boutte BOUTTE. And thank you for joining us, and come back again.
Hey, thanks,
Shawna.
Thank you to our sponsor, Gardena Cinema. Gardena Cinema is the only old-fashioned single-screen standalone neighborhood movie theater still in operation in the South Los Angeles area. Owned and operated by Judy Kim and the Kim family since 1976. Gardena Cinema has been able to transition to outdoor cinema in the parking lot for an intimate drive-in experience, and has hosted movie shoots, music video shoots, and still photo shoots for an authentic vintage-looking location. Thank you to our viewers. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Designing Hollywood Podcast on social media, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, and the YouTube channel for complete past and current episodes. Also, we're now available on Amazon and Siri Voice Search.